Alright, welcome back. It's Back to the Basics. I'm Sean Barr, and today we are talking about network security, specifically your network security policy, east, west, north, south. Let's go! Alright, we're back and we are talking network security, specifically security within a network. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about the three concepts or the three things you need to think about when developing security. So the first thing is policy. So developing a security policy, whether you're talking about network, access control, user access, passwords, you gotta start with the policy. Second is enforcement. So how am I gonna enforce the policy? Whether it's a firewall, whether it's an application that's on a desktop, a laptop, a mobile device management, any of that stuff, we need to think about how we're gonna enforce it. And lastly, how are we gonna log it? How are we gonna view what actually happened? How did we enforce it? Did we block something? Yes or no? Are they on the network? You gotta know all that. You gotta be able to see it. So that's logging. So that's it in a nutshell. Policy, enforcement, and logging. Those are the three things you wanna think about when developing your security policy. So let's get to the network. All right, so the network. So when you are thinking about your enforcement of the network security policy, the first thing you want to think about is my traffic east and west. And I'm not talking about across a country, I'm talking about east and west within the network. So that may be your finance team talking to your HR team. It may mean your servers talking to your users, or it may even mean like guests coming into the building. What can they do on the network? Do you allow guests to come in and print jobs? You know, do you allow them to come in and maybe share content wirelessly to a display? Things like that you need to define in your policy if you're going to allow that. Once you define that east and west traffic, then you can build firewalls, put ACLs in place to control it. Okay, the next thing with network security, we talked about east and west traffic. What about north and south? So that's leaving the network outbound to the internet. So what am I going to allow to the internet? Am I going to control things like I'm going to allow HTTP, HTTPS, and maybe that's it. Maybe I force them to go to DNS locally and I don't allow them to pick their own DNS server. Maybe I filter it down to, I allow SSH out from some parts of the network, but other parts I don't. Maybe I allow SMTP, maybe I don't. Those are all things north and south going outbound. I guess that would be north only, traffic going out, controlling what you're gonna allow out. So let's talk about south, coming into the environment. So our policy should dictate what we're gonna allow in. So maybe we have a web server, and maybe that web server should be on a DMZ. So we wanna make sure that we allow that traffic in for the DMZ, but do we allow from the DMZ into the internal network? Those are all things to think about and to consider when developing your network security policy. And lastly, authentication. If somebody plugs into my network environment, whether it's wired or wireless, how am I gonna authenticate them? And if it's wired, am I going to authenticate them? Am I gonna make them put in a username and password? Or if they don't authenticate, are they gonna get guest access? So that's it. We said a lot of stuff. We talked about just the overall concepts around security, policy, enforcement, and logging. And then we talked a little bit about what to think about when in developing a network policy for your network. East, west, north, south. What do we allow in? What do we allow left, right? All that stuff. If I said anything in this video that you're like, I'd like to know more about that, leave a comment, like, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next Back to the Basics.